Now, President Trump continues to claim that his economy is basically the best ever. It is the strongest, the greatest economy. And he is counting on that economy to win re-election in 2020. Now, in reality, the economy has been actually very great for a very small amount of people. That is the wealthiest Americans and largest corporations. Now, according to a report in Axios, American companies are still either hoarding money that they're making or spending it on stock buybacks instead of putting it back into their businesses and creating jobs. Now, this is not exactly breaking news. We have seen this before. We know companies are more interested in short-term profits, which is why they're doing stock buybacks and refusing to raise wages. Now, according to Neil Sheeran, chief economist at Capital Economics, who talked to Axios, he said that companies are reluctant to give their workers raises. Now, why would they be reluctant when they're flush with cash? Well, it turns out they said it's because it would hurt their share values, as Wall Street investors would be less willing to pay top price for shares where there is little expectation of cashing in on dividends or stock buybacks. Now, understand that in this system, they are incentivized to not raise your wages, because raising your wages would actually end up hurting their ability to make more profit. It is a zero-sum game. That means that no matter how many tax cuts and how friendly we are to the business community in corporate America, they will never, and I repeat, never substantially raise wages. Not unless that there is some sort of political pressure. And we have seen that from that kind of pressure from Bernie Sanders when it comes to Amazon and other large corporations. But you have to have that political pressure. All right. Now, here's the thing, right? It is a zero-sum game, right? And since they have a lot of the power, they will do what benefits them the most, which has led to the fact that the wealthy are still sitting on more wealth than they have ever had before. In fact, Axios writes, the top 1% of U.S. households are holding a record of $303.9 billion in cash. Now, for comparison's sake, just before the financial crisis, corporate America held $15 billion worth of cash. They are now doing much, much better than before the financial crisis. Now, it appears to me that more and more the financial crisis served as a vehicle to direct more wealth to the top 1%. They got all the bailouts, and regular people continue to struggle to make ends meet, even after it's been so long since the financial crisis. Now, this system is sick. And I don't mean that it's just broken. No. I mean that it is working as intended, which is sickening and should upset everyone who's watching. Now, the end result of this, of course, is that the money that would have been previously been split between business, workers, and for government projects like, for example, schools, healthcare, infrastructure, is instead sitting in corporate accounts, earning little to no return, according to the report. They're just hoarding that money. And that's it. They're hoarding that money like some sort of fantasy dragon. Think of Smaug from the Hobbit series, right? They're never going to use it. They just hoard the money. And of course, just like in those movies or those books, you even try to come for that money, and it's fire and brimstone in the form of lobbyists, politicians that scream socialism at you while throwing bootstraps. The truth is, that money, the money that is not spent or saved for future expenditures, for example, saving for a new house or saving for retirement or something like that, is basically wasted. It is taken out of circulation. It is being held hostage. It sits there, not being used, not being loaned out, which is also very important. And so there's less of that money, right? Which increases, of course, wealth and income inequality. That money, if loaned out or recirculated, could represent a new house or new car, or, if taxed and given out in distributed to people who need it. It could represent a meal. It could represent a new family being taken care of or being created, or somebody's health care, or even an infrastructure project. That's why we need to tax the rich. Taxing that money takes it out of existence and allows the government to redistribute it, to recirculate resources towards things that we actually need, like infrastructure, which right now is failing. Now, speaking of taxes, right? So now, while corporations and the wealthy ended up getting these massive tax cuts, right? The American people ended up actually paying a lot more. Now, according to IRS figures, the government had pulled in an additional $93 billion for 2018 from taxpayers on individual income taxes than it did for 2017. So understand, this is from individual taxpayers. This is you and me. This is not corporate accounts. Now, this is in part, by the way, thanks to the Treasury Department processing 1.5% more individual returns for 2018 than in 2017. So more people paid taxes. At the same time, last year, big business paid $91 billion less in taxes than they had in 2017. That is prior to the new law's passage. So individuals paid more, corporations paid less. But Jeff, everybody got a tax cut. Okay, that's true, right? Yes, of course everybody got an effective tax cut, right? However, according to an analysis from the Tax Policy Center, the lowest incomes, those making less than $25,000, only got an average tax cut of about $40. So there was a tax cut, but it was not very substantial. Now, look, obviously the more you make, the more of a tax cut you got, right? Because the more you pay taxes. So let's look at middle income families, right? Now, these households made between $48,000 and $86,000. And they ended up getting a tax cut of about $800. Okay, so they paid $800 less. Now, the top 1%, who made $733,000 or more, got an average tax cut of, guess what? About $33,000. That's huge. The difference in these numbers could not be more stark. While you might have got your close to $800 tax cut, if you're lucky enough to be in the middle class, that you might not have even been able to see, by the way, because, look, a lot of people did not know to adjust their withholdings this year. And so they ended up either not getting a return or not getting as big of a return, or even having to pay in. And there's been a lot of confusion since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the Trump tax cuts, were actually passed. And a lot of people, again, did not know to adjust withholdings, so they end up getting surprised by this massive tax bill they ended up getting. This whole thing, again, is just another piece of evidence that supply-side economics, or what we call trickle-down economics, is just another giant scam to benefit the rich. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.